The distress signal. The night sky above the alien world was on fire. Smoke rose like black rivers into the heavens, and the once bright cities of the planet of Ayari now burned like dying candles. People screamed as ships of the raiders, known only as the Kranith, descended from the clouds with weapons that spat fire and thunder. The defenders of the world tried to resist, but their weapons were old, their fleets small, and their spirits broken. Every hour another city fell, and every hour more voices were silenced. In the capital, deep underground, a group of desperate leaders gathered inside a bunker. The oldest among them, Elder Thaven, shook with both fear and hope as his trembling hand pressed a final button. A signal left the bunker, racing through the stars, a simple cry, but one filled with despair. It was a message of surrender, of pleading, of begging. 3 words, repeated again and again, in every galactic language known. SOS, help us, SOS. The message spread like a ghost through the darkness of space. It traveled past broken satellites, past empty colonies, and past old war relics that floated silent in orbit. It went farther, crossing trade routes, reaching listening posts of many alien species. They heard it. They all heard it. And they turned away. The Galactic Council, the proud keepers of law and peace, sat in their shining halls and whispered among themselves. To help the Vayari was to invite the Kranith's wrath, and the Kranith were monsters born from war. Few dared to fight them, none dared to challenge them. So the Council chose silence. So the great fleets of the galaxy stayed in their docks. So the distress signal went unanswered, but the signal did not stop. It kept moving, pushing farther, faster, until it reached a world unlike any other. A world the galaxy often mocked, feared, and whispered about in dark corners. The world called Earth on Earth, in the heart of the United Human Fleet Command. The signal appeared on screens late into the night. The officers gathered around, faces lit by the pale glow of the message. Admiral Kara Holt read it aloud, her voice low, her eyes cold. Her staff looked at her, waiting, afraid of what she might say. For this was not just any distress call. This was a test of what humanity stood for. Earth had been called a death world, a place so dangerous that only the strongest species could survive there. Its storms, beasts, and endless wars had shaped humans into something different. The galaxy respected and feared them. They were Deathworlders, and now the question hung heavy in the command room. Would humanity answer? The silence stretched. Young officers shifted in their seats, uncertain. Some whispered that it was not their fight, that the galaxy had ignored Earth before, so why should Earth care now? Others muttered that it might be a trap, that the Kranith wanted to lure the Deathworlders into war. But Admiral Holt raised her hand and ended the whispers. Her eyes burned with something that was both anger and purpose. "Mark this," she said, her voice steady like iron. "The galaxy ignored us when we needed them, but humanity will not be like them. If there is a voice crying for help, we will answer." The room fell silent again, but this time the silence was not fear. It was weight. It was history. It was the sound of a choice that would shape the stars. The signal of Vayari had reached the one people who could not ignore it, and across Earth's shipyards, deep in hangars where giants of steel slept, alarms began to sound. The Deathworlder Fleet was waking. Far away, the leaders of Vayari sat in their bunker, hopeless and broken. They did not know yet that their message had been heard. They did not know yet that an armada of fury was preparing to rise. Above their dying skies, the Kranith laughed, believing victory was already theirs. But in the darkness between stars, a storm was coming, and it was born from Earth, the Deathworlder decision. The signal from Vayari did not fade. It kept echoing in the halls of Earth's Fleet Command. ABI, voice that refused to be ignored. Admiral Kara Holt stood before a great table where the highest leaders of humanity had gathered. Generals, scientists, admirals, even politicians all sat in silence as the message repeated again and again. SOS, help us, SOS. The room was heavy with tension. Some of the leaders shifted uncomfortably, their minds filled with memories of old betrayals. Once, centuries ago, Earth had sent its own signals into the stars, pleading for help when famine struck, when asteroids threatened, when wars grew too large, and no one had answered. Humanity had survived alone, clawing its way up from the edge of extinction. It was why they were called Deathworlders. They had learned to endure what others could not. Now the question was on the table. Should Earth send its fleets to fight? A war that was not theirs. Should they risk their soldiers, their ships, their future? For aliens who had once mocked them. One senator, his voice sharp and bitter, slammed his hand down. "This is not our war," he said. "Let the galaxy see how it feels to be ignored as they ignored us." Murmurs filled the chamber, some nodding, others shaking their heads, but then General Arik Voss leaned forward, his scarred face hard as stone. "If we ignore this call, we become what we hate," he said. "Humanity survived because we stood together, not because we turned away." The argument grew louder. One side feared a trap, whispering of the Kranith's strength. They spoke of entire fleets crushed by them, of worlds stripped bare, of civilizations erased. The other side demanded action, saying that if humanity did not stand, then no one would. The galaxy watched Earth with both fear and hope. Every listening post, every spy, every council chamber was waiting to hear humanity's choice. Admiral Holt raised her hand, her eyes sweeping across the room. Her voice cut through the noise, steady and sharp. "Look around you," she said. "Every empire fears the Kranith, yet they do nothing. Every council talks of peace, yet they watch as worlds burn. We are not like them. We are Deathworlders, and when someone cries for help, we answer." Her words hung in the air, heavy like the toll of a great bell. The room fell silent. Even the senator who had spoken earlier lowered his gaze. There was no denying the truth in her voice. Humanity had suffered, yes, but their strength was not only in surviving, it was in refusing to let others fall where they once had. The decision was made. Orders were signed, sealed, and carried across the fleets. The engines of the great dreadnoughts roared awake, shaking the docks of Earth. Soldiers packed their gear, engineers armed the ships, captains stood tall at their stations. Humanity was moving to war. In the void between stars, the Kranith warlords laughed. They heard whispers that the Deathworlders were stirring. They mocked the idea that fragile humans would dare to face them. They told stories of weak flesh, of bones that would shatter, of minds that would break. They did not understand what Earth truly was. They did not know that Deathworlders were not fragile. They were forged by struggle, and now they were coming. Back in the command chamber, Admiral Holt spoke once more, this time to her captains. Her words were carried across every ship, every soldier, every crew. "The galaxy will remember this night," she said. "They will remember that when the call came, humanity answered. We do not fight for conquest. We do not fight for glory. We fight because no one else will." Her voice became iron. "Ready the fleet." And across Earth's skies, thousands looked up as the first of the great ships rose. Colossal shadows, black against the stars. Their hulls lined with weapons that gleamed like the edge of a sword. Children pointed with wide eyes. Old veterans saluted. Families whispered prayers. The Deathworlder Fleet was no longer a myth, no longer a rumor whispered in dark taverns. It was real, it was awake, and it was coming. Far away, the Vayari huddled in their bunkers, thinking they had been abandoned. They could not know that in the silence of space, an answer was already on its way. They could not know that their plea had reached the one people who would not look away. The Kranith's fire still burned their skies, but soon a storm greater than fire would arrive, and it carried the fury of Earth. The fleet awakens. The order spread like fire through the veins of Earth's great war machine. From hidden bases beneath mountains to orbital docks that circled the planet, humanity's fleet began to stir. Engines that had slept for years growled, alive, their thunder shaking steel walls. The ground trembled as hangar doors, larger than skyscrapers, slid open to reveal giants of war. In the vast shipyards of Luna, dreadnoughts rose from the shadows. Each one was a floating city, bristling, with cannons, railguns, and plasma lances. Their armor was thick and black, forged from metals mined on Deathworld soil. Metals strong enough to withstand storms that had crushed mountains. Across the Martian dry docks, cruisers and carriers waited, sleek and fast, like predators hungry for prey. Every ship bore the mark of Earth. Sharp lines, bold insignias, names. Carved into their hulls, names of fallen heroes, names of ancient battles, names that told the galaxy one truth. Humans remembered. Inside the ships, soldiers prepared. They strapped on armored suits, checked weapons, and whispered quiet words to themselves. Some were young, faces pale with fear, but their eyes burned with determination. Others were old veterans, scarred by 100 battles, their hearts steady as stone. Every one of them knew the weight of what they were about to do. They were not marching to conquer, they were marching to save. In Fleet Command, Admiral Kara Holt stood at the center of the command deck, her gaze fixed on the glowing map of the galaxy. Red lights marked the dying world of Vayari, its surface under siege, its skies burning. Around her, officers reported ship counts, fuel levels, supply chains, but her mind was already ahead. Already, on the battlefield to come, she knew the Kranith would laugh at humanity's move. She also knew that laughter would not last long. As the fleet assembled, spies across the galaxy sent out frantic reports. The Deathworlders were rising. To some, this news was terror. To others, it was hope. The Galactic Council whispered in fear, wondering if humanity's march would ignite a war greater than any before. But to the people of Vayari, who still huddled in the ruins of their cities, hope flickered like a candle for the first time. Some swore they felt something in the air, as if the very stars had shifted. Back in orbit, the dreadnought Iron Resolve led the formation. Its hull stretched nearly 3 kilometers. Its engines glowed brighter than a rising sun. On its bridge, Captain Elias Rourke looked out through the massive viewport, his hands clasped behind his back. He had seen wars, he had seen loss, but never before had he led a fleet of this size. The weight of millions of lives pressed on him, yet he did not waver. "These ships are not just steel," he whispered to his second officer. "They are a promise." One by one, the dreadnoughts, carriers, cruisers, and destroyers aligned, forming a wall of firepower unmatched in the known galaxy. The fleet stretched across the void, a dark horizon blotting out the stars. Signals flashed between ships, their codes crisp and sharp. The Deathworlders were ready. On the command deck, Admiral Holt gave the order, her voice echoing across the fleet. "Set course for Vayari, maximum burn." Engines ignited and space lit up with fire. The great fleet surged forward, tearing through the blackness of the void. Their speed was a storm, their presence a shadow of doom upon all who would stand against them. Far away in the burning skies of Vayari, the Kranith continued their slaughter. They did not yet know that the ground beneath their feet would soon tremble, that a storm of steel and fury was already racing toward them. They laughed as their ships blotted out the alien sun, believing no power in the galaxy could challenge them. They were wrong. In the silence of deep space, the Deathworlder fleet left behind the Earth they loved. Every heartbeat of their engines was a promise kept. Every cannon waiting to fire was justice waiting to strike. And as they pushed deeper into the void, one truth spread like fire across the stars. The Deathworlders had awakened, and nothing would ever be the same again. Arrival at the burning. The world of Vayari was dying. Flames painted the skies red, and black smoke covered the sun like a shroud. The Kranith ships circled above like vultures, their weapons firing down on helpless cities. Streets cracked with fire, towers fell into dust, and families hid in broken shelters waiting for the end. In the bunkers below the capital, Elder Thaven listened to the silence after each explosion. Every heartbeat was heavier than the last. Their SOS had been sent, but no answer had come. His people whispered that no one would help them, that no one dared to fight the Kranith. Many prayed for mercy, others prayed only for death to be quick. Above the planet, the Kranith warlord, Vayrek the Crimson, stood tall on his flagship. His crimson armor gleamed under the glow of burning cities. He laughed as he watched the destruction, his voice echoing across the bridge. "These weaklings thought someone would save them," he sneered, "but no one dares challenge the Kranith." But then, a shadow fell across the battlefield. At first it was faint, barely noticed against the blaze of the burning world. Then it grew, larger, darker, until even the Cranith turned their eyes to the sky. The stars vanished, blocked by an approaching wall of steel. And in that moment, every survivor on Veari felt it, the arrival of something vast, something unstoppable. The Deathworlder Fleet had come. From the void they emerged, dreadnoughts lined in perfect formation, carriers heavy with fighters, cruisers and destroyers bristling with weapons. Their hulls reflected firelight as they spread across the heavens like a second sky. The ground shook as their engines filled the atmosphere with thunder. The people of Veari stared upward in awe, tears cutting lines through the ash on their faces. For the first time in weeks, they felt hope. On the flagship Iron Resolve, Captain Elias Rourke stood before the viewport, his face lit by the fire of the burning world below. He raised his hand and spoke into the comms, his voice sharp and cold. "Broadcast to all Cranith ships," he ordered. "Message is simple. Stand down or be destroyed." The message echoed through every frequency, carried on every wave. The Cranith laughed, their warlord Vayrek sneering as he leaned back on his throne. "Deathworlders," he spat. "They think their steel will save them. They think they can frighten us," his lieutenants cheered, believing the humans were nothing but flesh and fragile shells. But the laughter faltered when the first human dreadnought fired. A beam of plasma brighter than lightning cut across the skies, striking a Cranith cruiser. The enemy ship exploded in a burst of fire, its wreckage raining down on the battlefield. Silence fell for a breath, a silence filled with shock. And then chaos began. Human fighters poured from the carriers like a swarm of iron hawks, their engines screaming, railguns fired from destroyers, their slugs piercing through enemy shields and tearing ships apart. Plasma storms erupted from dreadnoughts, carving holes in enemy formations. Every shot was precise, every strike a hammer of fury. The Cranith fleet, once confident and mocking, now scrambled in panic. On the surface, the people of Veari rose. From their shelters, they stood in streets still glowing with fire, watching the humans fight above. Children pointed at the glowing trails of fighters streaking through the sky. Elders whispered prayers of thanks, their tears mixing with ash, and warriors of Veari, broken and beaten, found new strength in their hearts as they saw Deathworlders fight for them. Back on the Iron Resolve, Captain Rourke gave his next command, his voice steady. "Target their flagship," he said. The dreadnought's weapons turned as one, their massive cannons glowing with power. The Cranith warlord Vayrek snarled on, his throne, rage flashing in his crimson eyes. For the first time he felt the cold edge of fear. Admiral Kara Holt's voice came across the fleet, clear and unshaken. "This world called for help, and we answered," she declared. "Deathworlders do not run. We do not hide, and we do not forget. Fight with fury, fight with honor, and let the galaxy see who we are." The order ignited the hearts of every soldier. Fighters dove with renewed fire. Dreadnoughts unleashed storms of energy. Cruisers carved apart enemy lines. The battle for Veari had begun, and in the heart of it, humanity's fury burned brighter than the fires of destruction. Fury of humanity. The skies of Veari became a storm. Human dreadnoughts fired in perfect rhythm, their railguns shaking the heavens, their plasma cannons burning holes through enemy lines. The Cranith, who once thought themselves untouchable, now found their mighty fleet crumbling around them. Every explosion was a reminder that the Deathworlders had come not with whispers but with fire. On the surface, the people of Veari cried out in awe as the sky itself seemed to split apart, where once they had only seen fire raining down from the Cranith. Now they saw a battle between gods. Human fighters streaked through the clouds like meteors, chasing down raider craft and blasting them apart in streaks of light. The ground shook as wreckage rained from the skies, the bodies of Cranith machines crashing into the soil they had once claimed. Inside the flagship Iron Resolve, Captain Elias Rourke moved with steady calm. Orders left his lips like sharp blades, cutting through the chaos. "Push them back, lock formation, Cut off their escape, he commanded, and the fleet obeyed. Every ship moved with deadly precision, every weapon sang with fury. The humans were not here to test their strength. They were here to end the slaughter. Admiral Kara Holt watched, from her command deck, her eyes never leaving the burning world below. She saw the desperate faces of Vayari through live feeds, their tears of hope, their cheers for every human strike. Her voice carried through the fleet once more. Remember why we are here. Not for conquest, not for power, but because they cried for help. And Deathworlders do not ignore a cry. Her words filled every soldier's heart with iron. In the hangars, pilots tightened their grips, mechanics cheered, Marines prepared to board enemy ships with fire in their eyes. This was not just war. It was justice. The Kranith flagship, a monstrous vessel of crimson steel, roared to life. Its cannons spat fire at the human dreadnoughts. Its shields flared with defiance. Warlord Vayrek stood tall on his throne, rage twisting his face. "Break them," he shouted. "Show these humans the fury of the Kranith." But the fury of the Kranith was nothing compared to the wrath of Deathworlders. The iron resolve turned its massive guns, every barrel glowing with terrible light. "Fire," Rourke said, his voice calm, and the ship obeyed. The blast tore across the void, striking the Kranith flagship. Its shields buckled, sparks flew, armor peeled away like broken bone. The warlord staggered as his throne room shook, his eyes wide with disbelief. For the first time, he saw the truth. Humanity did not bluff. Humanity did not falter. Humanity, struck with the weight of worlds behind them. Across the battlefield, more Kranith ships fell. Some tried to flee, but human destroyers hunted them down like wolves. Some fought to the last breath, but railgun slugs and plasma storms tore through their hulls. The once proud fleet of terror was being ripped apart piece by piece. On the ground, the people of Vayari shouted with joy. They climbed out of shelters, raising their voices to the skies. Children pointed at the Deathworlder ships, their eyes wide with wonder. Warriors who had once surrendered now raised their broken weapons in salute. They saw not conquerors, but saviors. Still, not all was victory. Vayrek's flagship, though wounded, still fought. The warlord bared his teeth, his voice echoing across the galaxy through stolen frequencies. "This is not the end, Deathworlders," he growled. "You may win this battle, but the Kranith will return, and we will bring fire enough to burn your Earth." Then, with a scream of engines, his flagship dove into hyperspace, vanishing into the void. The humans could not stop him. The enemy lived, and with him, a promise of vengeance. Silence fell slowly across the battlefield, broken only by the hum of human engines and the cheers of the rescued. The skies of Vayari cleared as the last of the Kranith ships fell in flames. The planet, though scarred, though broken, was alive, and it was alive because humanity had answered. On the Iron Resolve, Captain Rourke stood tall, his jaw set. "We saved them," his second officer whispered. Rourke nodded, but his eyes were hard. "Yes," he said, "but this war has only just begun." And in the shadows of the galaxy, Warlord Vayrek nursed his wounds and his rage. The Deathworlders had shown their fury, and now the galaxy would never be the same. A new alliance. The smoke of battle still hung over Vayari. The wreckage of Kranith ships drifted in orbit, glowing with dying flames. On the ground, cities smoldered, their ruins whispering of loss and survival. But through the destruction, there was something new, something the Vayari had not felt in years. Hope. The people gathered in the capital square, broken walls around them, yet their voices rising together. They cheered as human soldiers walked among them, armored figures who looked like legends from old tales. Children reached out to touch the metal boots of Deathworlder Marines, their eyes shining with wonder. Mothers wept as medics from Earth treated their wounded, not asking for payment, not asking for tribute, only saving lives. Elder Thaven, bent, with age yet unbroken in spirit, stepped forward. He bowed before Admiral Kara Holt as she walked among the crowd. His voice trembled but carried pride. "Your fleet has saved us when no one else would. You are not only warriors, you are saviors." From this day, the Vayari stand with humanity, in loyalty, in honor, in alliance. The crowd roared with approval, their voices echoing across the ruined streets, but Admiral Holt raised her hand, her expression firm. "We do not ask for kneeling," she said. "We are not rulers. We are not gods. We answered because you called. And if one day we call, we hope you will answer too." Her words struck deeper than any weapon, for the Vayari understood that the Deathworlders had not come to conquer. They had come to remind the galaxy of something forgotten, that strength was not only in power, but in compassion. Across the galaxy, whispers spread. Merchants carried tales of how the humans had fought with fury against the Kranith. Refugees told stories of dreadnoughts that blotted out the stars. And in the halls of the Galactic Council, ambassadors spoke in nervous tones. The question rose like smoke. Were the Deathworlders becoming a force of justice, or a storm too? Dangerous to be allowed to grow, some races, long oppressed, looked to Earth with hope. They sent secret envoys, asking for friendship, for trade, for defense. Others, fearful of losing their power, whispered of forming alliances against the humans. The galaxy was shifting, trembling at the weight of a single decision. Humanity's choice to answer an SOS on Vayari. Captain Elias Rourke stood before a group of young warriors. They had once laid down their arms in despair. Now they lifted them again, this time not in fear but in promise. "We will rebuild," one of them said, his voice fierce. "We will not let the Kranith enslave us again, and if they return, they will find not victims but fighters standing with humanity." Rourke nodded, pride flickering in his eyes. "That is what it means to stand as allies," he said. "Not to kneel, not to bow, but to rise together." Yet even in the glow of victory, shadows lingered. Reports came from scouts. The Kranith warlord Varek had survived, his flagship had escaped, his fury unbroken. Rumors whispered that he was gathering forces, calling old allies, promising vengeance he would not forgive and he would not forget. Admiral Holt listened to these reports in silence, her jaw tight. She turned to her commanders, her voice steady. "This battle is over," she said, "but the war has only begun. The Kranith will return, and they will come stronger. The galaxy must decide if it will stand with us or against us." In that moment, the alliance with Vayari was sealed. It was more than a pact of defense, more than a promise of aid. It was the spark of something larger, something the galaxy had not seen in centuries. A union not born from fear but from choice. And across the stars, messages began to move, some calling for friendship, some plotting war. The galaxy was no longer the same, because humanity had chosen to act, and because the Deathworlder Fleet had shown its fury. The warning, across the stars. The fires on Vayari had cooled, but the echoes of battle still lingered. Wreckage floated in orbit like a graveyard of steel, each broken Kranith ship a warning written across the sky. The Deathworlder Fleet hung in silence above the planet, black silhouettes against the fading stars. Below, the survivors rebuilt with trembling hands, their voices filled with gratitude and awe. In the command chamber of the Iron Resolve, Admiral Kara Holt stood before her. Officers' reports came in, casualty numbers, damage lists, requests from Vayari for supplies. Yet her gaze was fixed not on the victory but on the future, for she knew the Kranith had not been defeated, not truly. The warlord Varek still lived, and where he lived, vengeance would grow. She turned to Captain Elias Rourke, her voice calm but heavy with meaning. "Prepare the fleet for departure," she said, "but not home yet. Send the message, and make sure the entire galaxy hears it." Technicians leaned over their consoles, their hands moving quickly. Within moments, the Deathworlder Fleet's signal spread across the stars. It carried through council chambers, through marketplaces, through the darkest corners of forgotten space, a voice of iron, a voice that could not be silenced. "This is Admiral Kara Holt of the United Human Fleet," the broadcast began. "We heard a call for help and we answered. We do not fight for conquest, and we do not fight for tribute. We fight because no one else will. If you are under attack, if you are forgotten, if you are left to burn, send your call and the Deathworlders will come. The words shook the galaxy. On oppressed worlds, people wept as they heard them. In slave camps, chains felt lighter as whispers spread. On peaceful planets, leaders sat in silence, realizing the balance of power had shifted. And in the halls of the Galactic Council, fear grew like wildfire, for they understood the message's true weight. Humanity had not just saved one world, they had declared themselves guardians of all. It was a promise, but also a threat, because if the Deathworlders would rise for one world, they could rise for many, and their fury was not something any empire could ignore. On the distant edge of the galaxy, Warlord Vayrek sat in the shadows of his flagship. His armor dented, his pride wounded, but his hatred alive. He listened to the human broadcast, his claws digging into the metal of his throne. His laughter was low and bitter. "They think themselves saviors," he growled. "Let them spread their promise. Let them gather allies. When we return, we will bring not one fleet but 10. We will burn Earth until nothing remains but ash." His vow carried through the darkness, though no one heard it yet. But the future had already shifted. The seeds of war had been planted. Back on Vayari, Elder Thaven stood in the rebuilt square, surrounded by his people. He raised his voice to the crowd. "The Deathworlders answered us when no one else did. We will never forget, and when they call, we will rise beside them." The cheers of his people shook the ruins, for they were no longer broken, no longer afraid. They were part of something greater. As the Deathworlder Fleet began to depart, the people of Vayari lifted their hands to the skies. They watched the dreadnoughts vanish into the void, their engines glowing like suns, and they knew this was not an ending, it was only the beginning. In the command deck, Admiral Holt whispered to herself, "The galaxy thinks us dangerous, perhaps they are right, but better to be feared for justice than forgotten in silence." The fleet pushed deeper into space, carrying with it a warning and a promise. Every star they passed seemed to watch. Every empire seemed to hold its breath, because the galaxy had changed. The Deathworlders had risen, and the stars themselves trembled at their fury.